"Dad, my ear hurts," the black girl cried. The billionaire rushed her to the hospital, and then, "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much." The night was cold and silent as the city streets bustled with the usual late-night energy. Neon lights flickered, casting fleeting shadows across the sidewalks. But at the corner of Fifth Avenue, a small, trembling voice cut through the noise, piercing the stillness. "Dad, my ear hurts." The voice belonged to a young black girl, no older than 6 or 7, clutching her small frame tightly as she stood in the middle of the sidewalk. Her hand was pressed against her ear, and tears welled in her eyes as she winced in pain. The man beside her, a tall, well-dressed billionaire, stopped in his tracks. His face, usually so composed and confident, now twisted in concern as he knelt down to her level. "What happened, sweetie?" he asked softly, his voice laced with urgency. The girl, shaking, looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. "It hurts so bad," she whispered, her tiny body trembling. Without a second thought, the billionaire immediately scooped her up in his arms, his heart racing. His mind was already calculating the quickest route to the nearest hospital. He had no idea who this little girl was or why she was alone on the cold streets at this hour, but there was no time to question. As they rushed to the nearby car, the billionaire's mind raced. The girl was so small, so fragile, yet her pain seemed so immense. "Stay with me, kid," he muttered under his breath, adjusting his grip as he carefully placed her in the back seat. His hands moved quickly, his mind clouded with worry. The car roared to life, cutting through the streets in a flurry of urgency. Red lights flashed past as the city blurred around them. In the back seat, the girl whimpered softly, her tiny hands clutching the seat as she rocked back and forth. "It's going to be okay," the billionaire said, trying to reassure both her and himself. But the fear in her eyes only deepened the unease gnawing at him. Who was this child? Why was she on the streets alone at this hour? And why did she seem so scared? The car screeched to a halt in front of the hospital, the billionaire leaping out before the vehicle even fully stopped. He raced to the back, lifting the girl in his arms once more, her fragile body limp in his grasp. "Help!" he shouted to the nurses standing outside, his voice shaking with a mix of panic and authority. "She's hurt. Get her inside now." As they rushed through the emergency doors, the sound of machines and hurried footsteps filled the air. But as the doors closed behind them, the billionaire realized that this moment, this small act of kindness, would change everything. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a story that would unravel not just the truth about this girl, but his own. "I have just left the hospital, my hands still shaking from the rush, but something inside me tells me this isn't over. I don't know why I feel such a deep connection to this little girl, but I can't let her slip away without understanding who she is." After the doctors gave her some pain relief and did a quick examination, I sat in the sterile waiting room, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering above me. She was still quiet, her small body curled in the hospital bed, clutching the edge of the blanket like it was her lifeline. I walked over, trying not to make any noise, and gently pulled a chair beside her. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, she looked at me as though she didn't recognize me. But then, as if something clicked, she reached for my hand. I held it, trying to ease her fears. "You're going to be okay," I said, my voice softer now, more reassuring. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I could see the pain in her eyes, not just physical, but emotional. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" I asked gently, trying not to pressure her. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to the window, as if deciding whether or not she could trust me. Then, she spoke in a small voice. I didn't want to be in the way." Her words confused me, and I leaned in, trying to understand. "What do you mean? How did you end up alone on the streets?" Her face flushed slightly, and she looked down at the hospital sheets. "I was just walking. My mom, she's sick. I thought if I walked far enough, maybe someone would help." Her words stung more than I expected. This little girl, no older than 6 or 7, had been out on the streets by herself, desperately seeking help, all because her mother was sick and she had nowhere else to turn. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what she had just said. How could a child be forced into a situation like this? How could anyone let her walk alone in the cold, not knowing if she would find help or if she would end up lost and alone? My thoughts raced. This was more than just a medical emergency. This was a human crisis. I looked at the girl, wondering how many others there were like her. How many children were out there, struggling, hoping for a moment of kindness in a world that seemed too big and too indifferent to notice. I couldn't just let her go. I couldn't. "What's your name?" I asked, needing to connect to her in some way. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Anna," she whispered. "Anna, that's a beautiful name," I said, offering a smile, hoping it would bring her some comfort. She smiled back weakly, but there was something in her eyes that made me wonder how much this little girl had already been through. I leaned forward. "Anna, you don't have to be scared. I'm going to help you." She didn't respond right away, but her fingers tightened around mine. For the first time, I felt a real connection to this child. I had spent my life solving problems with money, power, and influence, but now, I found myself facing a problem that couldn't be fixed with a check or a phone call. I needed to be here for her in a way that went beyond just offering help. I needed to be her protector. The night dragged on, and after a few more hours, I was told she would be fine. The doctors had ruled out any serious injuries, but they wanted to monitor her overnight. As the nurses wheeled her into another room, I was left to my thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of her face, her quiet pain, her trusting gaze. I walked to the nurse's station and asked, "Do we know anything about her family? Her mother?" The nurse looked at me, her expression softening. "Her mother was admitted to the emergency room last week. She's very sick. We've been trying to reach family members, but so far, there hasn't been any response. I think they're on their own." "Where are they from?" I pressed. The nurse hesitated. "I'm not sure, but I think they've been living in the city for a while." My mind was already racing. I couldn't let her stay in the hospital any longer than necessary. I had to find her mother. I had to figure out a way to help them. I couldn't turn my back on Anna. As I sat back down in the room, Anna had fallen asleep, her small body curled under the blanket. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. I found myself staring at her, deep in thought. How had she ended up in this situation? And why did I feel so compelled to help her, to make sure she had a safe place to go? This wasn't just about offering money or providing a temporary solution. It was about giving her a future, a chance. I couldn't help but think of my own daughter, who had been so sheltered, so loved. How would she feel if she were in Anna's shoes? Would she still be standing here, hoping for someone to see her? As I turned off the lights and left the room, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let Anna slip through the cracks. I would not let her face the world alone. I sat at the edge of the bed, watching Anna sleep. Her small form barely moved under the white hospital blankets, the soft beep of the heart monitor filling the otherwise quiet room. The harsh fluorescent lights from the hallway seeped through the blinds, casting faint shadows that danced across the sterile walls. I had been here for hours, watching over her, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. This little girl, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a broken trust in the world, had somehow found her way to me, a stranger. She had placed her trust in me, and I couldn't help but wonder what that meant for her. Why had she been out there alone? Why hadn't anyone stepped in sooner? The thoughts swirled in my mind, pulling me in different directions, but one thing was certain. I couldn't let her go back to that life. The door creaked open, and the nurse stepped in, breaking my train of thought. "Mr. Caldwell," she said softly, her voice warm but professional. "The doctor has cleared her. We'll need to follow up with a pediatrician, but there doesn't seem to be any serious damage." I nodded, relieved but still uneasy. "Thank you," I replied, my voice tight. The nurse gave me a gentle smile before leaving the room, leaving me alone with Anna once more. I stood up, taking a few steps toward the window. The city outside seemed oblivious to the chaos that had unfolded in these walls. The lights of the skyscrapers blinked in the distance, the traffic moving in its never-ending cycle, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed for me. I couldn't keep ignoring the responsibility that was now weighing on my shoulders. Anna's safety, her future, had to be my priority. As I looked back at her, I knew that I had to do more than just offer temporary help. I needed to step up to make sure she had a life worth living. The first step was clear: get her out of the hospital and figure out where she could go. Anna, I said softly, walking to the side of the bed. She stirred slightly, her small face scrunching as she blinked awake. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition. Are you feeling better? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She nodded slightly, though her expression was still pained. My ear still hurts a little, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I felt a pang of guilt, wishing there was more I could do. I know, sweetheart, I said, reaching over to gently pat her hand. But you're safe now. We're going to figure this out. Her eyes searched mine for a moment, and then, for the first time since I'd found her, she gave me a small, tentative smile. It wasn't much, but it was something. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation settle on me once again. I could offer her comfort, a temporary solution, but I needed to find a more permanent answer. I couldn't just send her back to whatever life had led her to this point. I couldn't abandon her, not now. I looked down at my phone, making a quick call to my assistant. I need you to find out everything you can about a little girl named Anna, I said firmly. She's 6 or 7, and she's alone. I need to know where she's from, where her family is, and why no one's looking for her. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before my assistant responded. Understood, sir. I'll get to work on it right away. I hung up and turned back to Anna, who was watching me quietly, her eyes full of curiosity. Are you ready to go home? I asked, hoping she wouldn't be too scared. She nodded slowly, clutching her blanket tighter around her shoulders. I smiled at her, trying to reassure her as much as myself. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. You're not alone anymore. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the uncertainty, but she didn't pull away. Slowly, I helped her out of bed, guiding her gently as she stood up on shaky legs. Her small body trembled slightly, but she didn't complain. I could see that she was exhausted, her body weak from the pain and the emotional toll of everything that had happened. I gently helped her into a wheelchair, calling for the nurse to help with the transition. Once she was settled, I stood by her side as we made our way out of the hospital. As we stepped into the cold night air, the weight of the city pressed against me. The bright lights, the endless stream of cars, the cold wind. It all felt so far removed from what Anna had just been through. I looked down at her, her small hands clutching the arms of the wheelchair, her face pale but determined. We're going to get through this, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. The car was waiting for us at the curb, the engine running, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the chill of the night. I helped Anna into the car, making sure she was settled in before climbing in beside her. As the car pulled away from the hospital, I glanced over at her again, her eyes wide with a mix of exhaustion and confusion. Where are we going? She asked softly, her voice small in the silence of the car. I looked at her, my heart heavy with the weight of my promise. We're going to figure it out, I said, my voice firm, though I wasn't sure what that even meant yet. I just knew that I couldn't let her face the world alone anymore. I had spent the past few hours trying to figure out the next steps for Anna, but nothing seemed to make sense. I was a billionaire, used to making decisions in boardrooms and closing multi-million-dollar deals in a matter of minutes. Yet here I was, lost, trying to find a way to help a little girl who had nobody to turn to. As the car rolled through the streets of the city, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility I had just taken on. It wasn't just about money or influence anymore. This was about a child in need, someone who had been ignored, abandoned, and left to fend for herself. I had to do better. I had to make sure she didn't slip through the cracks like so many others. The ride was quiet, the only sound coming from the soft hum of the engine and the occasional honking of horns as we navigated the busy streets. Anna, sitting beside me, seemed to be lost in thought, her small body curled in on itself as she stared out the window. I glanced over at her, watching her as she slowly wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I could tell she was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. Her body was frail, her small shoulders sagging, weighed down by everything she had endured. Are you doing okay? I asked, my voice gentle, hoping to break the silence. She nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. I'm fine, she whispered, though I could tell it wasn't true. She wasn't fine. I wasn't fine either. Nothing about this situation was fine. I had spent my life building an empire, acquiring wealth, and securing my place at the top of the social ladder. But none of that mattered now. I wasn't sure how to help her, how to make things right, but I couldn't just turn away. As we pulled up to my mansion, the gates opening in front of us, I could see Anna's eyes widen slightly. She had been so quiet the entire ride, but now she seemed nervous, unsure of what to expect. I couldn't blame her. For all she knew, this could just be another stop on her journey through a world that didn't care about her. I reached over and placed a hand on hers, trying to offer some comfort. "It's okay," I said softly. "You're safe here. We'll figure everything out." Anna didn't respond, but she looked at me for a moment before slowly nodding. I could see the trust in her eyes, but I could also see the fear. She had been hurt too many times to fully believe in someone's promise of safety. As we stepped out of the car and into the grand foyer of my home, I noticed how small Anna seemed compared to the opulence surrounding her. The high ceilings, the polished marble floors, the grand staircase. It was all so overwhelming for her. I could see the unease in her body language as she looked around, unsure of where to place herself in this world. "You don't have to be scared," I said, kneeling down to her level. "This is your home now, too. You're going to be okay." She gave me a small smile, though it was hesitant, as if she wasn't entirely convinced. I didn't blame her. I wasn't entirely convinced either. I had a lot of work ahead of me to make this right. The first thing I needed to do was make sure Anna had everything she needed: clothes, food, comfort. But beyond that, I knew I needed to find out more about her past, about her family. I couldn't just offer her a roof over her head and call it a day. She deserved more than that. "Let's get you settled in," I said, offering her a hand. "You can have a bath, and I'll have someone bring you something to eat." She looked at me for a moment before slowly taking my hand. "Okay," she whispered, her voice small and uncertain. I led her up the stairs to one of the guest rooms, a large space with soft, white linens and a warm, inviting atmosphere. As I opened the door, I could see her hesitation again, the way she seemed to shrink back slightly, as if unsure of where she belonged in this new world. I didn't know how to erase the uncertainty from her face, but I knew I had to try. I wanted to make sure she never felt like this again. I helped her into the room and turned to leave, but as I was about to close the door behind me, Anna's small voice stopped me. "Is it really okay for me to stay here?" she asked, her eyes wide and searching. I turned back to her, kneeling down once more to meet her gaze. "It's more than okay," I said firmly. "You belong here. You're safe." I could see the relief wash over her face, though it was still guarded, as if she wasn't entirely sure if she could believe me. I smiled, giving her a reassuring nod. "Rest now. I'll take care of everything else." As I closed the door behind me, I leaned against the hallway wall for a moment, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just about a bed or food or shelter. This was about something far more important, giving Anna a chance to rebuild her life, to have a future, a chance to feel safe and loved. I didn't know how this story would unfold, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her down. I stood in the doorway of the guest room, watching Anna as she cautiously explored the space. She had taken a few tentative steps into the room, her fingers brushing lightly over the plush bedspread, her eyes scanning every corner of the room as though she was trying to make sense of it all. The soft, ambient light from the chandelier above reflected off the polished wooden floor, and the quiet hum of the house felt almost surreal to her, I imagined. She had come from a life filled with uncertainty, a life where the world had never felt like a safe place. Now, here she was, in a grand house, in a room that seemed more like a dream than reality. "Do you like it?" I asked, my voice softer now, cautious of disturbing the fragile moment. She stopped moving and turned to look at me. Her eyes, still a little guarded, met mine. "It's nice," she said quietly, almost as if she couldn't fully believe the words coming out of her mouth. I smiled at her response, trying to mask my own unease. "It's yours," I said, my words purposeful. "You can make it your own, however you like." I noticed the faintest flicker in her eyes, a mixture of hope and disbelief. She nodded slowly but didn't say anything else. "You don't have to rush to unpack or anything," I added quickly, realizing how overwhelming this must feel for her. "Just take your time." Anna moved toward the bed, sitting down on the edge. She reached out to touch the soft sheets again, running her fingers over them, a small smile tugging at her lips. I couldn't help but notice how small and fragile she seemed in that moment. I had made a promise to myself to protect her, to make sure she didn't have to live in fear anymore. But how could I fulfill that promise when I didn't even know where to start? I've arranged for some food to be brought up. Is there anything you want to eat? I asked, trying to keep the mood light. Anna looked up at me, her expression thoughtful. I'm not really hungry, she replied softly. I could tell she wasn't just talking about food. She was probably overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the past few hours, the strange environment, the whirlwind of emotions. You know, I said, sitting down in the armchair across from her, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to try my best. You're not alone anymore. Anna met my gaze, and for a brief moment, I could see the flicker of trust in her eyes. It was there, buried deep beneath the walls she had built around herself. She was scared, but she was willing to believe me. And that was all I needed. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the moment hanging between us. I had no idea what the future held for us, or how long it would take to heal the wounds that had been inflicted on her. But I was determined to find out. The soft knock on the door broke the silence, and I stood up to answer it. A staff member entered, wheeling in a tray with a variety of food, but I could see Anna's hesitation. She didn't move. Is it okay? I asked gently, glancing at her. She gave me a small nod, and I helped the staff member set the tray on the small table beside the bed. I offered her a smile, though it felt a little forced. You don't have to eat if you're not hungry, I said. She looked at the food for a moment, her gaze lingering on the small plate of fruit, the warm bowl of soup, the bread. Then, almost imperceptibly, she reached out and picked up a piece of bread. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, relieved. It was a small step, but it was something. Anna didn't speak much after that, and I didn't push her. She ate in silence, taking small bites, as though savoring the moment of peace. I watched her, my heart heavy with the weight of what she had been through. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to know. But I wasn't going to push her too soon. She had already been through enough. After she finished eating, I stood up and walked to the door. I'll be right outside if you need anything, I said softly. She looked up at me for the first time in a while, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. Maybe gratitude, maybe fear, maybe something else entirely. Thank you, she whispered again. This time, it sounded more genuine, more real. I nodded, my heart swelling with a sense of both responsibility and hope. You don't have to thank me, I said quietly. I'm just doing what anyone would do. But even as I said those words, I knew they weren't true. I wasn't just anyone. And this wasn't just about offering food or shelter. This was about making a commitment to her future, to her safety, to giving her a chance at something better. I closed the door behind me and leaned against the wall outside. The mansion felt cold and quiet, and for a moment, I could almost hear the sound of Anna's breath, steady and fragile in that room. I had no idea what her future held, or how I would help her navigate it, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her face it alone. I couldn't. Not after everything she had been through. Not after everything I had just witnessed. I sat outside Anna's room, my mind racing with a million questions. She had been through so much in her short life, and I wasn't even sure where to begin helping her. The mansion was quiet, too quiet. The staff had been instructed to give us space, but I found myself pacing the hall, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The silence was oppressive, weighing down on me. It wasn't just about providing a roof over her head or making sure she had food and comfort. It was about something deeper. I had promised myself that I wouldn't let her slip through the cracks, but what did that promise really mean? What would it take to give her the life she deserved? I couldn't help but think of my own childhood, the privileges I had, the safety and security that were always there for me. It was hard to reconcile that with Anna's reality. She had lived a life where she had to fend for herself, a life where trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. But here she was, in my house, and I had to find a way to help her heal, to help her believe in a world that hadn't always been kind to her. I finally walked back to her room, hesitating for a moment before knocking softly on the door. Anna, I called gently, just loud enough for her to hear. Can I come in? There was a pause before she answered. Yeah. Her voice was quiet, unsure. I opened the door slowly and stepped inside. Anna was sitting on the bed again, her legs curled beneath her. She looked up at me, and for the first time since I had met her, I saw a flicker of something different in her eyes. It was small, but it was there, trust. I walked over to the side of the bed and sat down, keeping a bit of distance, not wanting to make her feel cornered. How are you doing? I asked, my voice softer this time. She shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. It's okay. I'm fine. The words were so small, so guarded, that it was hard to believe her. I could see the hesitation in her body language, the way she kept her arms wrapped tightly around herself. I sighed quietly, feeling the weight of her words. Anna, I said, choosing my words carefully. You don't have to be fine. You're allowed to be upset, to be scared. You've been through a lot, and it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. She looked up at me then, her eyes searching mine. For a moment, I thought she might say something, but she just stayed silent. I could tell she was wrestling with something, trying to make sense of it all. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, I said, trying to give her space. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded slowly, but didn't say anything. I didn't push her. She needed time. I could see that much. I'm going to get you some clothes, something comfortable, I continued. I know this is a lot to take in, but we'll go step by step. Anna didn't respond, but I saw her shoulders relax just a little. It was a small change, but it was enough. I stood up and left the room, my mind still racing with all the things I needed to figure out. I knew I had to make a plan, but I didn't have all the answers. I wasn't even sure where to start. I went to the guest room and asked the staff to prepare something for Anna. When I came back, I found her sitting by the window, looking out at the city below. She didn't turn when I entered, but I could see her tense up slightly as I walked toward her. I set the clothes down on the bed and sat next to her. These are for you, I said gently, if you want to change. She looked down at the clothes, her fingers brushing over them, but she didn't pick them up. Instead, she turned back to the window, her gaze distant. I waited for a moment, not wanting to intrude. I know you've probably been through a lot, I said quietly, and I can't pretend to understand what it's been like for you, but I want to help. You don't have to do this alone. Anna was still for a long time, but then she slowly looked at me. Her eyes were guarded, but there was something else there now, something softer, like she was beginning to believe in the possibility of something better. Thank you, she whispered. The words were so simple, but they hit me harder than I expected. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. You're welcome, Anna. Just take your time. I stood up to leave, but before I could reach the door, she spoke again. What happens now? She asked, her voice quiet, unsure. I paused and turned back to her, looking into her eyes. Now we take it one step at a time, I said, my voice firm. We'll figure this out together. She nodded slowly, but I could tell that she was still processing everything. It was a lot to take in, and I didn't expect her to trust me right away. But I had to believe that with time, she would. As I left the room and closed the door behind me, I felt a sense of resolve. This wasn't going to be easy. There were so many obstacles, so many unknowns, but I couldn't back down. Anna was depending on me, and I wasn't going to let her down. I had spent the last few days getting to know Anna better, trying to help her adjust to her new life in the mansion. It wasn't easy. She was still quiet, still wary of the world around her. But there was a small spark of hope in her eyes now, something that had been absent when I first found her on the street. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, even if it was just a tiny glimmer. But there were still so many unanswered questions. Who was Anna really? Why had she been out there alone? I needed to find out more about her past, about her family, and why no one had come looking for her. I knew that I couldn't help her fully until I understood the whole picture. I made a call to my assistant, asking for help in gathering any information we could find on Anna and her family. She promised to get back to me as soon as she had anything. In the meantime, I decided to focus on helping Anna feel more comfortable. I knew it wasn't enough just to give her a place to stay. I needed to show her that this was her home now, and that she wasn't just some temporary guest. The next morning, after breakfast, I took Anna to the library. It was a massive room, filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and huge windows that let in the morning sunlight. I could see Anna's eyes widen as she looked around, clearly overwhelmed by the space. I smiled, trying to make her feel more at ease. You can read anything you like, I said. This room is yours as much as it is mine. If you ever need some peace and quiet, this is the place to be. She hesitated at first, but I could see her curiosity piqued as she walked over to one of the shelves. I watched as she ran her fingers over the spines of the books, her small face focused in thought. After a few moments, she pulled a book from the shelf and opened it. "What is this about?" she asked, her voice a little more confident now. I glanced over at the book. It was an old classic, something that had been passed down through generations in my family. "That one's about adventure and exploration," I said. "It's about finding new places, new ideas, and discovering things you never knew existed." Anna nodded slowly, taking in my words. "That sounds nice," she said quietly. I smiled at her. "It is. And who knows? Maybe one day you'll go on an adventure of your own." Anna looked up at me, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Maybe," she whispered. The thought of Anna going on an adventure of her own felt so distant, so far away from the reality we were living in. But I wanted to believe that one day, she would have that chance. That she would feel free enough to dream, to live without fear of what the next day might bring. But for now, I had to take things one step at a time. After a few hours in the library, Anna seemed a little more relaxed. She had picked out a few books and seemed to enjoy flipping through them, reading the stories aloud to herself. I could tell she was still hesitant to fully embrace her new life, but I could also see that she was starting to feel a little more comfortable. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Later that evening, I took Anna out into the garden. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden light over the sprawling grounds. The flowers were in full bloom, and the air smelled fresh and clean. I had always loved the garden. It was a place of calm, a place where I could think and find clarity. And I wanted Anna to experience that, to see that there was beauty and peace in the world, even after everything she had been through. As we walked through the garden, I could see Anna's eyes widen with wonder. She seemed to relax as we passed by the fountains and flower beds, her small hands gently brushing the petals of the flowers as we walked. "This place is beautiful," she said softly, her voice full of awe. "I've never seen anything like it." I smiled at her, feeling a sense of pride. "I'm glad you like it," I said. "You deserve to have beautiful things in your life. You deserve to feel safe and happy." Anna didn't respond right away, but I could see her looking around, taking in everything with a new sense of wonder. It was a small shift, but it was something. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe that things could be different, that she could have a better life. As we continued to walk, I heard my phone buzz in my pocket. I took it out and saw that I had a message from my assistant. I opened it quickly. It was a brief update. There were no new leads on Anna's family yet, but she had managed to find out some information about the address where Anna had been staying before she ended up on the street. I knew it wasn't much, but it was a start. I made a mental note to follow up with my assistant later. But for now, I pushed the thought out of my mind. I needed to focus on Anna, on helping her adjust to this new life. I turned to her, smiling as she looked up at me. "How about we get some ice cream?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Ice cream?" she asked. I nodded, grinning. "Ice cream. It's the perfect way to end a day like today." Anna hesitated for a moment, then a small smile tugged at her lips. "Okay," she said softly. "I think I'd like that." And for the first time, I saw her truly smile. It wasn't a huge smile, but it was real, and that was enough for me. I sat at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in front of me, staring out the window at the sprawling grounds of the estate. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. I had been up for hours, thinking about Anna and the new direction her life had taken. It had only been a few days, but already, everything felt different. She was adjusting, slowly, but I could tell it wasn't easy for her. The girl who had once been a stranger was now living under my roof, and it seemed like every moment brought new challenges. But today, something felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I had a sense that today would be the day I got some answers. I had been doing everything I could to help Anna adjust, making sure she had everything she needed, but I couldn't help but feel like there was something I was missing. I needed to understand more about her past. Who was her family? Why had no one come looking for her? I couldn't rest until I had those answers. My phone buzzed on the table, and I reached for it, glancing at the screen. It was a message from my assistant. I opened it quickly, my heart beating a little faster. The message was brief, but to the point. "I have information. The address where Anna was staying before. Contacted the landlord. No sign of family, but someone came to pick up her belongings." I sat back in my chair, reading the message again. Someone had picked up her belongings? It was a start. I needed to know who that person was, and why they had taken her things. But I couldn't focus on that now. There was something more immediate I had to deal with. I stood up and walked to the living room, where Anna was sitting on the couch, a book in her hands. She didn't look up as I entered, but I could tell she had noticed me. Her body language was still guarded, her legs tucked underneath her, her gaze fixed on the pages of the book. In front of her, I had been trying to give her space, let her take the lead, but today I decided it was time for a conversation. Anna, I said softly, my voice breaking the silence. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, as if surprised I had spoken. How are you feeling today? I asked, my voice casual, but there was an underlying concern. She hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. Okay, she said quietly, looking back down at the book. Just, still figuring things out. I nodded, understanding more than she knew. I had been thinking the same thing. I know it's been a lot, I said, sitting down across from her. But I want you to know that you're not alone. Whatever's going on in your past, whatever you're feeling, I'm here to listen. You don't have to keep it all inside. She looked up at me again, her expression unreadable. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, something like fear, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. I don't know what to say, she whispered. I don't even know how to talk about it. I smiled gently, trying to ease her discomfort. You don't have to talk if you're not ready, I said. But when you are, I'm here. No pressure. She nodded, but I could tell she was still unsure. I didn't push her. I knew it would take time. She had been through too much for me to expect anything else. How about we take a walk in the garden? I suggested, changing the subject. It might help clear your mind a bit. We can just talk, no pressure. Anna looked at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, she said, standing up from the couch. I led her outside, the warm air hitting us as soon as we stepped onto the porch. The garden was lush with flowers and greenery, and the path was lined with towering trees that provided a comforting shade. We walked in silence for a while, the sound of birds chirping in the distance the only noise. As we walked, I couldn't help but glance over at her. She seemed to be taking in the beauty of the place, but there was a wariness in her step, as if she was still unsure whether this world was real or whether it was just another temporary escape. It's beautiful here, she said after a long silence, her voice soft, almost to herself. I smiled, relieved to hear her speak. I'm glad you like it, I said, pausing for a moment to watch her take in the flowers that were in full bloom. You deserve to feel safe here. I know it's been hard for you, but I want you to know that you have a place now. This is your home, Anna. She didn't say anything, but I could see her shoulders relax just a little. It was small, but it was progress. We kept walking, taking our time as we moved through the garden. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden light over everything. It was peaceful, but the weight of everything still hung over us. As we reached the far end of the garden, I stopped and turned to face her. Anna, I said, my voice gentle. I know things are still uncertain, and I know you're scared. But I promise you, I'm going to find out what happened to your family. You won't have to keep carrying this burden alone. Anna looked at me for a long time, her eyes searching my face. Finally, she nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice was so small, but the sincerity behind the words was enough to make my heart ache. I reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You're welcome, Anna, I said softly. You're not alone anymore. I watched as Anna picked at her food, the silence between us stretching longer than I'd anticipated. We had been living in the mansion together for over a week now, and though there had been progress, something still felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were pieces of her story that were still hidden, things she wasn't ready to share, and I didn't want to force her into anything she wasn't prepared for. But as I sat across from her at the dining table, watching her eat, I knew that she deserved to have a future where she didn't have to hide, where she could feel safe enough to open up. The mansion had become a strange sort of refuge for both of us. I had brought Anna in, hoping to give her a new life. But I was beginning to realize how much I needed to change as well. My life had always been controlled, predictable. I had everything I could possibly need: money, power, success, but it had all felt hollow. And then Anna had walked into my life, turning everything upside down. I had always believed I could fix things with my resources, but this was different. This wasn't something I could fix with money. It wasn't just about providing for her. It was about giving her a sense of worth, of belonging. I needed to find out where she came from, what had brought her to this point, and who had left her to fend for herself on the streets. The more I thought about it, the more determined I became. I wouldn't let her be just another lost child in a broken system. I had the power to help her, and I was going to use it. The next morning, after breakfast, I made another call to my assistant. I need you to push harder, I said, my voice more urgent than before. Find out everything you can about Anna's family. I want to know who picked up her things, where they took them, and why they haven't come forward. The assistant acknowledged my request and promised to look into it. It wasn't much, but I had to start somewhere. I hung up the phone and turned to see Anna sitting on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her. She was staring out the window, her gaze distant. I could tell she wasn't fully present, as if her mind was somewhere far away, trapped in a past that I couldn't touch. I hesitated for a moment before approaching her, unsure of what to say. I didn't want to push her, but I needed to make sure she knew she could talk to me when she was ready. I sat beside her, but I didn't speak right away. For a long time, we sat in silence, the only sound in the room the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Finally, Anna spoke. I remember my mom, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. She used to tell me stories before bed, about places far away, where there were no bad people, just good people who helped each other. She said one day I'd be able to go there. I always thought I would. Her words broke something inside me. I could hear the pain in her voice, the sadness that she had carried with her for so long. She was so young, yet she had already experienced more heartache than most people would in a lifetime. What happened to your mom, Anna? I asked, my voice gentle. She didn't look at me when she spoke, her eyes still fixed on the window. She got sick, Anna said, her voice thick with emotion. She couldn't take care of me anymore. I didn't know what to do, so I ran. I thought maybe if I could find someone who cared, they could help us. But no one ever did. I don't think anyone even knew we were there. The weight of her words sank deep into my chest. I couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her, to be abandoned, to be left alone with no one to turn to. I reached out, gently placing my hand on hers. You don't have to go through this alone anymore, Anna, I said softly. I'm here for you, and I will do everything I can to find out what happened to your family, to get you the answers you deserve. She finally turned to look at me, her eyes full of uncertainty, but also a flicker of hope. But what if I don't want to remember? She asked, her voice small. What if I don't want to know what happened? I understood her fear, her hesitation. Sometimes, it was easier to pretend the past didn't exist, to bury the pain deep inside. But I knew she couldn't move forward unless she faced it. It's okay to be scared, I said, squeezing her hand gently. But you don't have to do it alone. I'll be right here with you, every step of the way. And when you're ready, we'll figure it out together. She looked down at our hands for a moment, as though contemplating my words. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered, almost to herself. I smiled at her, relieved that she had agreed, even if just a little. I didn't expect her to open up completely, not yet, but this was a step forward. After a few moments, Anna stood up, stretching slightly. I think I'll go to the garden for a bit, she said, her voice a little more steady now. I like it there. I think that's a good idea, I said, standing up as well. Take your time. I'll be here if you need anything. She smiled at me, a small, tentative smile, before walking toward the door. I watched her go, my heart heavy with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Anna was beginning to trust me, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The more I learned about her past, the more I realized how much damage had been done, how much healing would be needed. But I also knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let her face it alone. I watched as Anna stepped out into the garden, her small form disappearing into the lush greenery. It had been a few weeks since she had arrived at the mansion, and though things had improved, there was still a sense of uncertainty that lingered in the air. I had tried my best to offer her comfort, to give her a sense of belonging, but I knew that it wasn't enough. The past few days had been a mixture of quiet moments and unsettling discoveries. I had learned more about Anna's family, more than I had expected to. The information my assistant had gathered was eye-opening. Her mother had been in and out of the system for years, unable to provide for Anna in any meaningful way. No one had come forward to claim her when she was found on the street, and it was becoming increasingly clear that Anna had been abandoned long before I found her. The realization hit me harder than I expected. It was one thing to offer someone a home, but another thing entirely to rebuild their life from the ground up. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Anna's life before she came to me had been filled with neglect and hardship. And as much as I wanted to offer her a fresh start, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Anna had been through so much, and it wasn't just about finding her family or making sure she had food and shelter. It was about helping her heal, helping her trust again. I sat on the porch for a while, my mind spinning with thoughts of how to proceed. I needed to have a conversation with Anna. It was time to talk about the past. I couldn't continue to ignore the elephant in the room. But how could I bring it up without overwhelming her? I didn't want to push her too hard, but I also knew that it wasn't healthy to keep pretending that everything was okay. I stood up, my mind made up. I walked into the garden to find her. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light over the flowers. Anna was sitting by the fountain, her gaze fixed on the water. She looked peaceful, lost in thought. I approached quietly, not wanting to disturb her too abruptly. "Anna," I said gently, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned to look at me, her expression soft but guarded. "Hey," she replied, her voice a little shaky, like she was unsure of what to expect. "How are you feeling?" I asked, taking a seat beside her on the stone bench. She shrugged, the familiar hesitation returning to her eyes. "I don't know," she said quietly, her voice small. "I'm still trying to figure things out." I nodded, understanding more than she knew. "I know it's been a lot to take in," I said softly. "And I don't want to rush you, but I think it's time we talk. About your past." She stiffened slightly, her hands gripping the edge of her dress. "I don't know if I can talk about it," she whispered. "It's hard. I've been through so much, and it just feels like it'll never end." My heart broke hearing her say that. I knew she was scared, that she felt like everything was slipping through her fingers, but I also knew that talking about it might help her start to heal. "I'm not asking you to tell me everything right now," I said gently. "But I want you to know that whatever you're feeling, whatever you've been through, it's okay. And you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Anna looked at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and vulnerability. I could see her fighting with herself, unsure whether to let her guard down or keep it up. Finally, she spoke. "I don't want to feel like this anymore," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I don't want to feel scared all the time, like someone's going to take me away again." The words stung, but I understood them. Anna had spent so much of her life running, surviving, trying to find safety where there was none. "I promise you, Anna," I said, reaching out to gently take her hand. "You are safe now. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to be afraid." She squeezed my hand, but her eyes remained uncertain. "But what if I don't belong here?" she asked, her voice small. "What if I don't fit in with your life?" Her words were full of doubt, but they also carried the weight of the loneliness she had carried for so long. "You belong here," I said firmly, my voice full of conviction. "This is your home now. I don't care about your past, Anna. What matters is that you're here, and I'm here to help you start over. You're not just some guest. You are part of this family." I could see the doubt in her eyes slowly start to shift, replaced with a glimmer of hope. It was small, but it was there. "You really mean that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do," I replied, squeezing her hand. "You are part of this family, Anna, and we'll figure out everything else together, step by step." For the first time since I had met her, Anna gave me a small, genuine smile. It was the first real smile I had seen from her, and it made something inside me shift. Maybe there was hope after all. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. We sat there for a while, just watching the sunset, the warmth of the moment settling over us. It wasn't a perfect solution. There was still a long way to go, and I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just helping Anna. She was helping me too. She had brought something into my life that I had been missing for years, purpose. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something that truly mattered. I had spent the last few days settling Anna into her new life, but there was still something unsettling about it. She was getting used to the mansion, starting to smile more, and even beginning to open up in small ways. But there was still a distance between us, a distance I couldn't close with a few comforting words or a fresh start. She had been through too much, seen too many things that had scarred her, and I knew that healing wasn't something that happened overnight. But I also knew that the past wasn't something we could ignore forever. I had to figure out what happened to her mother, what had driven her to the streets, and why no one had ever come for her. The uncertainty weighed on me, and I couldn't let go of the feeling that something was still lurking in the background, something that I couldn't yet see. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, interrupting my thoughts. I grabbed it quickly, hoping it was the information I had been waiting for. The message was from my assistant. "I've found a lead. I'll need to meet you in person to discuss." My heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the breakthrough I had been hoping for. I sent a quick reply, telling my assistant to meet me at the mansion in an hour. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I tried to focus on the tasks at hand, but my mind kept wandering back to Anna. I found her in the living room, sitting by the fireplace, her fingers tracing the rim of a mug in front of her. She wasn't looking at me when I entered, her gaze fixed on the flames. I could tell she was deep in thought, but she still looked like a child who was trying to make sense of everything she had been through. I stood there for a moment, not wanting to interrupt, but also wanting to check in with her. "How are you?" I asked softly, my voice gentle. She glanced up at me, and for the first time in days, I saw a hint of unease in her eyes. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I'm trying to get used to this, but everything feels so different. It doesn't feel real." I sat down next to her, careful not to crowd her. "I understand," I said. "You've been through a lot. It's okay to feel like this is all a dream. But you're safe now, and you don't have to go through it alone anymore." She nodded slowly, her fingers still lightly grazing the mug. "I don't know if I can trust it," she whispered. "Everything in my life has been so unpredictable. I don't know how to believe that this could be real." Her words hit me hard. How could I explain to her that she could trust me, that this wasn't just another temporary fix? I couldn't give her promises that I wasn't sure I could keep, but I knew one thing. I was going to do everything in my power to make sure she was okay, to make sure she didn't feel like she had to fend for herself anymore. "You don't have to believe it all at once," I said, trying to offer her some comfort. "Trust comes in small steps. But you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your own anymore. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. For the first time in a long time, I saw something in her eyes, something like hope. She didn't speak, but I could see the shift in her. It was small, but it was there. I had to believe that it meant something. The doorbell rang, breaking the moment. I stood up, offering Anna a smile. "I'll be right back. I have to meet with someone." She nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. I left the room and made my way to the front door. As I opened it, I saw my assistant standing on the other side, holding a folder in her hand. She stepped inside, and I led her to the study, where we could talk privately. "What do you have?" I asked, my voice tight with anticipation. My assistant opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "I managed to track down the landlord who rented to Anna's family," she said. "He had some information on her mother. Apparently, she had been in and out of shelters for years, and there's a history of neglect and instability. But the most important thing I found is this." She handed me a photo, one of Anna as a child, smiling with her mother. I stared at it for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation sink in. This was a piece of Anna's past, a past that had been hidden from her for so long. "This photo was taken a year before Anna ended up on the street," my assistant explained. "Her mother wasn't in the best health at the time, and it seems like Anna's family had been struggling for a while. But no one knows where they went after that." I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. "What about her father?" I asked. "There's no mention of him in any of the records," my assistant replied. "It looks like he was never involved in their lives. Anna's mother was doing her best to take care of her, but it seems like she couldn't keep up with the challenges. There's no one left to turn to, no family, no safety net." I stared at the photo again, feeling the weight of Anna's story hit me all over again. "She's all alone," I whispered. My assistant nodded. "It's a tragedy, but we still don't know where her mother is, or why no one has come forward to claim Anna." I sat there for a moment, processing everything I had just learned. I didn't know what had happened to Anna's mother, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Anna face the world alone. I had to find out what happened to her family, but more than that, I had to make sure she knew she was loved, that she had a place to belong. "Keep digging," I said, my voice firm. "We need answers. But more than that, I'm going to make sure Anna has a future." My assistant nodded and left the room, leaving me with the weight of the responsibility on my shoulders. I walked back to the living room, where Anna was sitting, still lost in thought. I knew there was more she needed to hear, more that I needed to say. But for now, I just sat beside her, offering her a moment of peace. We would face the truth together, and no matter what happened, I wouldn't let her face it alone. I stood by the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds of the mansion. The light from the setting sun cast a warm, golden hue across the landscape, but my mind was far from peaceful. I had learned so much in the past few days about Anna's past, but I still didn't have the answers I needed. I couldn't stop thinking about her mother, wondering what had happened to her, why no one had come forward, why Anna had been abandoned. The unanswered questions gnawed at me, and I knew that if I didn't get to the bottom of this soon, the uncertainty would start to tear at the fragile trust we had built. I could see Anna from where I stood, sitting on the porch swing outside, her legs dangling loosely as she looked out into the distance. She had been quieter than usual today, her movements more hesitant, like she was still processing everything that had happened in the past few weeks. It had been a slow adjustment, but I had seen progress in her. She had started to trust me, and for the first time, she seemed like she was allowing herself to believe that she might actually have a future here. But there was still so much pain behind her eyes, a pain that I couldn't fix just by offering her a place to stay or making sure she had food and clothes. This was bigger than that. I walked outside and joined her on the porch, sitting down beside her on the swing. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. The peaceful sound of the evening breeze rustled through the trees, but there was still a tension in the air, one I couldn't quite shake. Anna didn't look at me right away, but I could see her fingers slowly tracing the edge of the swing, her mind somewhere far away. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft, careful not to startle her. She glanced at me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I'm trying to be. But everything feels so confusing." I nodded, understanding all too well. She had been thrown into a new life, one she hadn't asked for, and everything around her had changed. The people she had known, the life she had known, it was all gone, and in its place was uncertainty and fear. "It's okay to feel confused," I said gently. "You don't have to have it all figured out right away. You've been through a lot, Anna, and it's okay to take things one step at a time." She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the ground. We sat in silence for a few moments, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, she spoke again, her voice small. "Do you ever wish things were different? I mean, not just for me, but for everyone, that things could just be better?" Her question caught me off guard, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. I had spent so many years building my empire, focusing on success, but I hadn't really thought about what it all meant in the grand scheme of things. Sure, I had everything I needed: money, power, influence, but none of that mattered if the people around me weren't happy, if they weren't truly okay. "Yeah," I said quietly, my voice filled with more sincerity than I expected. "I do. I think everyone deserves a better life, a better chance. But sometimes, the world doesn't give you that chance. And it's up to us to make it happen, to give people like you, like me, that chance." Anna was silent again, her fingers still tracing the swing's edge, her brow furrowed in thought. "But how?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "How do you make it happen when everything feels like it's falling apart?" I thought about her question for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Sometimes, it's just about showing up," I said finally. "It's about being there for the people who need it most. Not because it's easy, but because it's the right thing to do. And little by little, you start to see change." Anna looked at me then, her eyes searching mine, and for the first time in a while, I saw a flicker of hope. It was small, but it was there. "I think I understand," she said softly. "But it's hard. It's hard to believe in things when so much has gone wrong." "I know," I replied. "But that's why I'm here. I want to help you, Anna. I want to make sure you don't have to carry that weight alone anymore." She was quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting back to the horizon, but when she spoke again, her voice was different, more certain, more grounded. I think I can try," she said, her voice just above a whisper. I smiled, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. "That's all I can ask," I said softly. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it one day at a time, and we'll figure it out together." Anna nodded slowly, the corners of her lips lifting in a small, tentative smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I had watched her grow in the short time she had been here, watched her open up in small ways, and I knew that this was just the beginning. There was still so much work to be done, so much healing that needed to happen, but we were on the right path. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in a soft, golden light, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Anna was here, and I was going to do everything I could to give her the future she deserved. The past might have shaped her, but it wouldn't define her. And as I looked at her sitting beside me, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together. I stood at the window, looking out over the garden as the wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves of the trees. The house felt too quiet, too still. Anna had been getting more comfortable over the past few weeks, settling into her new life here, but something was changing. I could feel it in the air, a shift that I couldn't quite place. She had started to ask more questions about her past, about her mother and where she had gone. I had been putting off those conversations, not wanting to push too hard, but I knew that eventually, we would have to face them head on. The truth was, Anna's past wasn't just something we could ignore. It was a part of her that she couldn't outrun, no matter how many new experiences she had. Her history had shaped her, had made her into the person she was today, and if we were going to move forward, we had to confront it. I had spent the morning making calls, trying to find any trace of her mother. There were still no answers. No one knew where she had gone after she disappeared, and the few people who had known her had only vague recollections of her struggles. I couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration building inside me. I had promised Anna that I would help her, that I would be there for her no matter what, but I couldn't do that if I didn't know what had happened to the people who were supposed to take care of her. It was a feeling of helplessness I hadn't experienced in years. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself distracted, my mind racing with thoughts of Anna and her past. It was hard to focus on anything else. I knew I needed to be strong for her, but I wasn't sure I could keep my promise if I didn't have the answers. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I quickly made my way to the front door, opening it to find my assistant standing outside, holding a folder in her hand. "We found something," she said, her voice serious. I stepped aside to let her in, my heart pounding in anticipation. "What is it?" I asked. My assistant handed me the folder, and I quickly flipped it open. Inside were several pages of documents, some old, some recent, detailing the last known whereabouts of Anna's mother. "She's in a shelter," my assistant said, her voice quiet. Or at least, she was. "We tracked her down to a place called the Haven Shelter, a few towns over. She checked in about a month ago, but there's no record of her since then." I felt a sense of relief mixed with a growing sense of urgency. "A month ago?" I asked, my voice tight. "That's not long. Do we know where she went after that?" My assistant shook her head. "No, but we're still looking into it. It's the best lead we have right now." I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. "Give me the details of the shelter. I need to know everything we can." My assistant nodded and handed me the rest of the paperwork. I glanced at it quickly, my mind already turning. The shelter had been known for offering help to those in need, particularly to single mothers and their children, but it also had a reputation for being understaffed and overwhelmed. The more I read, the more I realized how little information we had. Still, this was the closest we had come to finding anything. "I'll go there myself," I said, my voice determined. "I'll find her." My assistant hesitated. "Are you sure? It's a long drive, and we don't know what we'll find when we get there." I looked at her, my eyes hard. "I don't care. Anna deserves answers, and I'm going to give them to her." My assistant nodded, clearly understanding. My resolve. She left soon after, and I was left alone again, standing in the foyer, holding the documents in my hand. The weight of the situation pressed down on me. I had promised Anna that I would help her find her family, but how much of her past could I uncover before I realized that I had nothing left to give her? I couldn't let her go back to a life of uncertainty, but I also couldn't ignore what was happening. I had to find her mother. I had to make sure that Anna's past wasn't going to haunt her forever. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the shelter. After a few rings, a woman answered. "Haven Shelter, how can I help you?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "My name is Richard Caldwell," I said. "I'm looking for a woman named Sarah Thompson. She was staying at your shelter recently, and I need to know where she is." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, sir," the woman finally said. "I can't give out that information. We have strict privacy policies." I felt frustration rising in my chest. "Please," I said, my voice softening but firm. "It's important. She has a daughter, Anna. I'm trying to help them." The woman hesitated again, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "I can't give you any specifics," she said, "but I'll tell you this. She left about 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, but that's all I can say. I thanked her and hung up, feeling more defeated than ever. 2 weeks. That was the last clue I had, and it wasn't enough. But I wasn't going to give up. Anna deserved better, and I wasn't going to let her down. I stood up, grabbing my coat and keys. It was time to take action. I wasn't going to wait any longer. It was time to find Sarah Thompson. Time to find the answers Anna needed. And I wasn't going to stop until I had them. I drove in silence, my mind focused on the road ahead. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow across the landscape as I navigated the winding country roads. My assistant's information had led me here, to a small, nondescript town about 2 hours outside the city. Haven Shelter was located on the outskirts, a place known for offering temporary refuge to those in need. But it wasn't the shelter that had drawn me here. It was Sarah Thompson, Anna's mother. The search for her had taken me in circles, and every lead I'd followed seemed to fade into nothing. But this time, I could feel something in my gut telling me that I was getting closer. As I pulled into the parking lot of the shelter, I noticed the old building in the distance, its faded paint and overgrown shrubs giving it a weathered, neglected look. The shelter was small, nothing like the grand institutions I was accustomed to. It felt real. I parked the car and stepped out, the chill in the air catching my breath. I made my way up the front steps and pushed the door open, the faint sound of conversation echoing inside. The receptionist looked up from her desk as I entered, her expression cautious but not unfriendly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. "I'm looking for Sarah Thompson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was told she was staying here recently. The receptionist hesitated, her fingers tapping nervously on the desk. "I'm afraid I can't give out that kind of information," she said. "We have strict confidentiality policies." I nodded, understanding the rules. But I wasn't here to play by the rules. I had to find Anna's mother, and I wasn't going to leave without answers. "I understand," I said, "but I'm trying to help her. Sarah's daughter, Anna, has been looking for her. I just need to know where she is." The receptionist seemed to consider this for a moment, then sighed. "I can't give you the specifics," she said quietly, "but I can tell you that Sarah left here about a week ago. She didn't give us a forwarding address, and we haven't heard from her since." My heart sank. Another dead end. "Do you know where she went?" I pressed. "Did she leave with anyone?" The receptionist shook her head. "I'm sorry, I don't know. She was a quiet woman. Came in, stayed for a few weeks, then left. We've tried to reach her, but we haven't had any luck." I could hear the frustration in her voice, the helplessness that mirrored my own. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Is there anyone here who might know more?" I asked. The receptionist looked over her shoulder, as if considering whether or not to share more information. Finally, she nodded toward a door at the far end of the room. "You can try speaking to the shelter director, Mrs. Caldwell. She might have more details." I thanked the receptionist and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of the situation settle even heavier on my shoulders. As I knocked and entered the office, I was greeted by an older woman with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. "You must be Mr. Caldwell," she said, standing up to shake my hand. "What brings you here?" I introduced myself and explained my connection to Sarah Thompson and Anna, making sure to mention the daughter's desperate search for answers. Mrs. Caldwell's expression softened. "Sarah," she said, sitting down at her desk. "She's been here off and on for years. Struggling mostly. I'm afraid I don't have much to offer in the way of help, but I can tell you that Sarah's situation was complicated. She tried, but life kept throwing obstacles in her way. And Anna." She paused, her face tightening with emotion. "She's a sweet girl. I'm sorry to say, though, that Sarah's been running from something. I'm not sure what, but I know it wasn't good for either of them." The weight of her words sank in. I had hoped for more clarity, more certainty, but instead, I was left with more questions than before. "Do you know where Sarah might have gone?" I asked, "or who she might be with?" Mrs. Caldwell shook her head slowly. "I wish I could help you, but when Sarah left, it was like she disappeared. I don't know where she went or who she's with. She was always good about keeping her distance from people here, never letting anyone in too close." My frustration began to build again. How could Sarah just vanish without a trace? How could she leave Anna, her daughter, behind like this? "Please, you have to know something," I urged. "Anything at all." Mrs. Caldwell looked at me for a long moment, and then her eyes softened with a kind of sorrow I hadn't expected. "I do know one thing," she said quietly. There's a man who used to come around here. Not often, but he visited Sarah a few times. A tall man, dark hair. I don't know his name, but I'm pretty sure he knew her before she came to us. Maybe he's the one she went to. My mind raced as I tried to piece everything together. This was the first lead I had that felt somewhat concrete. It wasn't much, but it was something. Do you know where I can find him? I asked urgently. Mrs. Caldwell hesitated again, looking down at her desk. I'm sorry, but I don't. I never asked for his name. I didn't think it was important. But if you want, I can see if any of the other staff here remember more about him. I know the other shelter workers sometimes knew Sarah's visitors better than I did. I nodded, desperate for any information she could provide. Mrs. Caldwell made a quick phone call, speaking briefly with one of the workers before hanging up. I'm sorry, but no one remembers his name, she said with a sigh. But one of the staff members said he had a car. A black sedan. Maybe that's something you can follow up on. I stood up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Thank you, I said, my voice firm. This is a start. I'll find him. As I left the shelter, the cool evening air hit my face, and I felt a surge of determination. I was getting closer. I could feel it. I wasn't going to stop until I found Sarah, and more importantly, until I brought Anna the answers she had been waiting for. I had been chasing this lead for what felt like forever. The black sedan, the one that had been linked to Sarah's mysterious visitor, was now my only real clue. I couldn't afford to waste time. Anna needed answers, and I wasn't going to let her wait any longer. The streets blurred past me as I followed the directions from Mrs. Caldwell. The car's engine hummed steadily beneath me, but my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more urgent than the last. What if I was too late? What if Sarah had moved on, disappeared without a trace? I couldn't allow myself to think that way. I had promised Anna that I would find her mother, and I wasn't about to break that promise. I reached a quieter part of town, the roads growing narrower as I got closer to my destination. The black sedan had been parked in front of a small, dilapidated house on a street that didn't look like it had seen any improvements in years. I slowed down, scanning the area, trying to make sense of it all. The house was isolated, surrounded by overgrown grass and a few rundown cars. It looked like the kind of place people tried to forget. I parked a few houses down the street, the engine of my car clicking as it came to a stop. I sat there for a moment, taking a deep breath, before getting out and walking toward the house. My footsteps were the only sound, crunching against the loose gravel underfoot. As I neared the house, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. I wasn't sure what I would find when I knocked on the door, but I had to do this. For Anna. I reached the front door and knocked, the sound echoing through the empty street. I waited for a few moments, but no one answered. I knocked again, this time harder. Still nothing. I stepped back, trying to decide what to do next, when I saw a figure appear in the window. The curtain pulled back slightly, and a pair of eyes watched me from inside. My heart skipped a beat. Whoever this was, they had been watching. I took a step forward, trying to remain calm. The door creaked open, and a man stood in the doorway. He was tall, his face shadowed by the dim light inside, but I could see the hardened look in his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff. "I'm looking for Sarah Thompson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's been staying here, I'm told." The man's eyes flickered with something. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, but he quickly masked it. "She's not here," he said bluntly. "She left." I tried to keep my frustration in check. "Do you know where she went?" I asked, my voice firmer now. "I need to find her." The man hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his tone colder now. "You should leave." I knew he was lying. I could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his eyes shifted. He knew something. I wasn't about to let him shut me out without answers. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what happened to her," I said, my voice quieter but more forceful. "I'm trying to help her daughter, Anna." At the mention of Anna's name, the man's expression faltered for a split second, just long enough for me to catch it. "Anna," he repeated, his voice lowering. "What do you know about her?" "I know that Sarah has a daughter," I said, "and I know that she's been looking for her mother. Anna deserves answers." The man looked away for a moment, clearly conflicted. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was deciding whether or not to tell me the truth. Finally, he spoke again, his voice softer. "She wasn't supposed to leave like this," he muttered. "Sarah, she was trying to protect her daughter, but she couldn't keep running. She was in too deep." "In too deep with what?" I pressed, my heart beating faster. What are you talking about? The man looked down at the ground, his face hardening again. I can't get into all of it, he said, his voice low. But Sarah was trying to get out. She was involved in something she couldn't escape. I tried to help her, but his words trailed off, and I could see the regret in his eyes. She left because she had to. She thought it was the only way to keep Anna safe. I felt a chill run through me at the mention of Anna's safety. What do you mean? I asked, stepping closer. What happened to Sarah? The man took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping slightly as if he had made a decision. I don't know where she went, he said finally. But she was scared. She was afraid of the people after her, afraid they would hurt Anna. She thought if she disappeared, they would leave her daughter alone. But I think she made a mistake. They're still looking for her. I felt my stomach tighten at his words. Who's looking for her? I asked urgently. Who's after her? The man shook his head, his expression resigned. I don't know, but they'll stop at nothing to find her. And they'll come after anyone who gets in their way. My mind was spinning. This was bigger than I had imagined. Sarah hadn't just disappeared. She had been running from something dangerous. And Anna was caught in the middle of it. I needed to find Sarah. And I needed to protect Anna. Do you know where Sarah is now? I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. The man looked at me for a long moment before speaking again. I can tell you one thing, he said. Sarah's going to try to contact Anna soon. She left something for her. I leaned forward, desperate for any clue. What is it? Where is it? The man hesitated before nodding toward the back of the house. There's a box, he said. It's hidden behind the shed in the backyard. Sarah said it was for Anna, in case she ever needed it. If you want to find her, that's where you start. Without wasting another second, I turned and walked toward the back of the house, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the break I needed. I moved quickly around the back of the house, my heart racing in anticipation. The man had mentioned a box hidden behind the shed, something Sarah had left for Anna in case she ever needed it. I had no idea what it could be, but it was my best lead yet, and I wasn't going to waste it. The yard was overgrown, weeds creeping over the ground, and the shed stood at the far end, a little run down but sturdy. I reached the shed, my breath shallow as I glanced around, looking for any sign of the box. It wasn't long before I spotted a small patch of dirt that seemed to be disturbed, an area where the ground had been recently moved. My pulse quickened as I knelt down and began digging with my hands. It was slow work, but soon enough, my fingers brushed against something solid. I cleared the rest of the dirt away to reveal a small, weathered box. It was made of wood, old and worn but surprisingly well preserved, as though it had been carefully hidden away. I took a deep breath and carefully opened the box. Inside, there were several items, a few folded pieces of paper, a small picture frame with a photo of Anna as a child, and a handful of what looked like trinkets. Personal things, sentimental items that likely meant something to Sarah. I picked up the photo first. It was of Anna and her mother, taken when Anna was much younger, maybe 6 or 7. They were both smiling in the picture, but there was a sadness in Sarah's eyes, a kind of tiredness that seemed to hint at everything they had already been through. I felt a pang in my chest, knowing how much Anna must have missed her mother, even if she didn't fully understand why Sarah had left. I set the photo aside and unfolded one of the pieces of paper. It was a letter written in a neat but shaky handwriting. As I read it, I realized it was from Sarah to Anna. My sweet girl, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm not there with you anymore. I know I've let you down, and I'm so sorry. I tried to protect you, but the world I was in, it was too dangerous. I couldn't keep you safe, and I couldn't bring you into that life. But I want you to know that I love you more than anything in this world. You are my heart, and no matter where I am, you will always be my everything. You are strong, Anna, stronger than I was. And one day, you will be free. Please forgive me for not being there when you needed me most. I pray you find a way to forgive yourself, too. The letter was brief, but it said everything. Sarah had been trying to protect Anna, even if it meant disappearing. She had been running from someone, that was too dangerous for Anna to be around. My hands shook as I finished reading, a mixture of heartbreak and anger rising inside me. I knew I couldn't undo what had happened to Sarah, but I could help Anna now. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the box, then looked at the other items. There was a small, delicate bracelet inside. Something simple, with a tiny charm on it that looked like it had once been part of a larger set. It was a piece of Sarah's past, something that belonged to her before everything fell apart. There was also a key, old and rusted, with a note attached to it. I picked up the note, my curiosity piqued. It was written in the same shaky handwriting. "For when you're ready," it said. "This key opens a place that holds the rest of our memories. When you're old enough, you'll know where to find it. I hope you never need it. But if you do, it's yours." I stared at the key for a long time, my mind racing. What was this place? Where was it? And why had Sarah left this for Anna? I knew I had to find out. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed to involve Anna in this, but I wasn't sure if she was ready. I placed everything back into the box, carefully, making sure it was all intact. I couldn't help but feel like this box held the key to Anna's future, to understanding the full story of what had happened to her family. But it wasn't just about finding her mother anymore. It was about finding the strength to move forward, to help Anna heal from a past that had been filled with pain and fear. As I stood up and walked back toward the house, I felt the weight of the situation settle over me. Anna wasn't just a girl who needed a home. She was a survivor, and I was going to do everything I could to make sure she never had to face the world alone again. I walked into the house, the box in my hands, and found Anna sitting in the living room, staring out the window again. She looked up as I entered, her eyes searching mine. I didn't say anything right away. I just held out the box, offering it to her. She looked at it for a long moment before standing up and taking it from me. "What is this?" she asked, her voice quiet. "It's something from your mother," I said, sitting down beside her. "Something she wanted you to have." Anna sat down beside me, slowly opening the box. She didn't say anything at first, just picked up the letter and began reading. I could see her face soften as she read her mother's words, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of something in her eyes. It was the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. When she finished reading, she looked at me, her eyes filled with emotion. "I don't know what to do with this," she whispered. "I don't know if I can forgive her for leaving me." I reached out and placed a hand on hers. "You don't have to forgive her right now," I said gently. "But you have to understand that she loved you. She did what she thought was best, even if it wasn't easy. And now, it's your turn to make the decisions. Whatever happens, you don't have to do it alone." Anna nodded slowly, the tears in her eyes threatening to spill over, but she didn't cry. She just held the box tightly in her hands, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I sat beside her, waiting for her to speak, knowing that whatever she decided, I would be there to support her. I watched Anna as she sat quietly in the living room, the small wooden box resting on her lap. She hadn't spoken since she opened it, her gaze fixed on the items inside, the letter from her mother, the picture, and the key. I could see the emotions playing across her face, the subtle shifts that told me she was working through everything in her mind. It had been a few days since I found the box, and in that time, Anna had shown signs of opening up, but today, something had shifted. The walls she had so carefully built around herself seemed to be cracking, and I could tell that the weight of her mother's words was slowly settling in. Her fingers gently traced the edges of the letter again, as if she was trying to memorize every word, every syllable. I knew this was a lot for her. No child should ever have to carry the burden of their parents' struggles alone, but Anna had been doing that for years. It was clear now that her mother had been caught in something dangerous, something that had forced her to disappear. It wasn't just about the physical absence, but the emotional toll it had taken on Anna. I stood by the doorway, watching her, waiting for her to speak, but I knew better than to rush her. She had to do this in her own time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Anna placed the letter and the picture back into the box, the key still clutched tightly in her hand. She looked up at me, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since she'd opened the box. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can forgive her." I felt my heart tighten at her words. I could see the pain in her eyes, the conflict. "You don't have to forgive her right now, Anna," I said softly, walking over to her. "This is your journey. Your mother made difficult choices, but that doesn't mean you have to carry the weight of them. You're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling." She nodded slowly, tears starting to well up in her eyes. I sat down next to her, not saying anything at first, just offering my presence, my support. After a long silence, she spoke again. "I keep thinking that maybe if I had done something different, she wouldn't have had to leave," Anna said, her voice breaking. Maybe if I had been better, or if I had tried harder, she wouldn't have disappeared. The guilt in her voice was clear, and it stung. It was the kind of guilt that comes from believing that somehow you are responsible for things that were out of your control. Anna, I said gently, you were just a child. You couldn't have stopped any of this. Your mother did what she thought was best for you, even if it wasn't the way we wish it could have been. She shook her head. But she left me. She left me, and I'm still here. I should have been enough for her to stay. I reached over and placed my hand on hers, trying to offer her comfort, though I knew there was no easy answer to this. You are enough, I said, my voice firm. You always were. But sometimes, people make decisions based on what they think is best for those they love, even when it's hard. She left because she thought it was the only way to protect you. It wasn't your fault, Anna. It never was. She didn't respond, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind, her eyes searching for some kind of resolution. I knew it wasn't going to come immediately, that healing was going to take time, but at least she was beginning to understand the truth. I stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the garden. The trees were swaying gently in the breeze, and the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. Do you ever wonder why we have to go through all of this? Anna asked suddenly, her voice distant. Why do people have to hurt each other? Why do things have to be so complicated? I turned to look at her, her face full of questions that I didn't have the answers to. I think sometimes life just throws things at us that we don't understand, I said slowly, walking back over to sit beside her. But what matters is how we handle those things. What matters is that you have a chance to decide who you want to be, no matter what happened before. Anna was quiet for a long moment, her eyes focused on the box in her lap. She was thinking, processing, trying to make sense of the pieces of her past that had been scattered so carelessly. I think I understand, she said softly, her voice steady. It's just going to take time. I need time to figure this out. I smiled at her, proud of her strength. Take all the time you need, I said. I'm here, and I always will be. And whenever you're ready, we'll take the next step together. For the first time in a while, I saw a real shift in Anna. Her shoulders were less tense, her expression more relaxed. There was still sadness, still fear, but there was also a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She wasn't giving up. She wasn't letting her past define her anymore. Thank you, she whispered, her voice quiet but sincere. I don't know what I would do without you. I reached out and gently touched her shoulder. You don't have to do this alone, I said. You never have to face anything alone again. We'll get through this together, one step at a time. Anna smiled faintly, her eyes still a little red from the tears, but there was a warmth in her gaze that hadn't been there before. I think I can do this, she said, her voice full of quiet determination. I'm ready to move forward. It's just going to be hard. I nodded, understanding fully. It will be hard, I said. But you're stronger than you think, Anna. And I'll be here every step of the way. We sat in silence for a while, the sun setting slowly behind the trees, the air cool but comforting. In that moment, I knew that Anna was beginning to find her way, and I was going to help her find it. Together, we would face whatever came next, and whatever happened, I would make sure she never had to feel alone again. I walked into the living room, my footsteps slow and deliberate. Anna was sitting by the window again, gazing out into the evening sky. The glow of the setting sun reflected off the glass, casting a soft, golden light across her face. For a moment, I stood there, just watching her. She seemed at peace, her body relaxed, but I knew better than to think everything was okay. Anna had come so far, but the road ahead was still filled with obstacles. The truth about her mother had hit her harder than I had anticipated, and though she was beginning to understand that it wasn't her fault, I could see the uncertainty still lingering in her eyes. She had been through so much, and even with all the love and support I could give her, there was still the fear that something would go wrong, that the past would come crashing back in and take everything away. It wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about Anna finding her place in the world, about her realizing that she could still have a future despite the darkness she had lived through. I didn't know how to help her see that, but I was determined to figure it out. As I stepped closer to her, I spoke softly, not wanting to startle her. How are you doing? Anna turned toward me, her eyes still a little distant. She didn't immediately respond, but I could see the faintest trace of a smile on her face. I'm okay, she said quietly, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. I sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her, but close enough to show her that I was there. You don't have to pretend with me, Anna, I said gently. I know it's been hard, but you don't have to carry this weight alone anymore. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine for something. Maybe reassurance or understanding. Maybe just someone who wouldn't abandon her. I don't know what to do with everything, she said, her voice wavering. It's like everything I thought I knew is just gone, and I don't even know who I am anymore. Her words were raw, and they cut deep. I could feel the weight of them, the burden she was carrying. She had lost so much, her mother, her home, her sense of security, and now she was left with the remnants of a life that no longer made sense. I placed a hand on hers, offering what little comfort I could. You're still you, I said softly. No matter what's happened in the past, you're still Anna. You still have a future, and you have the power to decide what that future looks like. She blinked, the first hint of something real in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or just the realization that she didn't have to let the past define her. But what if I'm not strong enough? She asked, her voice small. What if I can't get through it? I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear that she wasn't enough, that she wasn't capable of moving on from the pain. It broke my heart to see her doubt herself like this, but I knew that strength wasn't about never feeling fear. It was about facing that fear, no matter how big or small. You don't have to be strong all the time, I said gently. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel lost. But that doesn't mean you can't get through it. And I'll be right here, helping you every step of the way. Anna's gaze softened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something else, trust. She had been so guarded for so long, afraid to let anyone in, but in that moment, I could see her starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could let her walls down. You really mean that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my voice firm. I do. You don't have to do this alone, Anna. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. We sat there for a while, in the quiet of the room, the soft light from the window surrounding us. Anna didn't say anything else, but I could feel the shift in her. She wasn't as distant as before. She wasn't as afraid. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. It wasn't a bright, overwhelming light, but it was there. I knew it was the beginning of something. I didn't know what would happen in the days and weeks to come. I didn't know if we would find Sarah, or if the truth would come crashing down on us. But I did know one thing for certain. Anna had already started her journey of healing, and I was going to be there, every step of the way, helping her find her way. The past wasn't going to control her anymore. It didn't matter what had happened before. What mattered was that Anna had a future, and it was hers to create. It was time to let go of the past, and start moving forward, one step at a time. And for the first time, I believed we could do it. I watched as Anna slowly walked across the room, the letter from her mother still clutched in her hands. It had been a few days since she had first read the letter, and since then, I had seen a subtle change in her. The distance in her eyes was slowly beginning to fade, replaced by something that resembled hope, even if it was just a flicker. She had come a long way in such a short time, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The weight of her past still loomed over her, but it was clear she was beginning to find the strength to face it. I had watched her struggle, silently, over the past few days, trying to come to terms with the truth of her mother's disappearance. But it was clear that Anna needed more than just a new life in this house. She needed to understand why it had happened, and more importantly, why she had been left behind. Anna, I said softly, my voice gentle but firm as I approached her. She looked up, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but I could see something else there too, resolve. Are you ready to talk about it? About what happened? About your mom? Anna hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to the letter in her hands, before nodding slowly. I think I'm ready, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I don't know if I'll ever understand, but I have to try. I took a seat beside her, giving her space to speak, knowing that this moment would be difficult, but it was necessary. It was time for Anna to face the truth, to start unraveling the story that had haunted her for so long. She sat down next to me, the letter now resting on the coffee table between us. She took a deep breath before she spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. I don't remember a lot of the bad stuff, Anna began, her eyes distant as she looked down at her hands. I remember some things, little things, like how my mom used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep. But most of the time, she wasn't there. She would disappear for days, sometimes weeks, and I would be left alone. I didn't understand why, but I knew something was wrong. My heart ached as I listened to her words. No child should ever have to feel that kind of abandonment, especially not from their own mother. She was always trying to protect me, Anna continued, her voice more composed now, though I could still hear the underlying sadness. I remember her telling me that the world wasn't safe, that I had to be careful, that there were people out there who would hurt us. She would always look over her shoulder, like she was scared someone was watching us. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. She was afraid. Afraid of what? I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Anna looked up at me then, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and confusion. I don't know exactly. I don't think she ever told me. But I know she was running from something, someone. She didn't want me to get involved, but I think she had no choice. I think she was in too deep. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but there were still so many gaps, so many unanswered questions. And then what happened? I asked, my voice encouraging, wanting her to keep going. She just left, Anna said, her voice breaking as she wiped a tear from her cheek. She said she was going to make things right, that we would be safe. But she didn't come back. And I was just left there alone. I reached out and gently placed my hand on hers, trying to offer some comfort, but I knew there was nothing I could say that would take away the pain she was feeling. Anna, I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion, none of this is your fault. You didn't ask for any of it. Your mom was doing the best she could, and even though she had to make a hard choice, it doesn't change how much she loved you. She wanted to protect you, and she did, in her own way. Anna looked at me then, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But why did she leave? Why didn't she just take me with her? She asked, her voice full of desperation. I felt the weight of her question settle on my chest, and for a moment, I didn't know how to answer. Sometimes, I said slowly, carefully, people think they're doing what's best, even when it doesn't make sense. Your mom loved you, Anna, and she thought that by disappearing, she could keep you safe from whatever was out there. It wasn't about abandoning you. It was about trying to protect you, even if it was the hardest thing she had to do. Anna's eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she took a deep breath and nodded, as though trying to understand. I still don't understand at all, she said quietly. But I think I'm starting to. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't the reason she left. No, I said firmly, you weren't. None of this was your fault, Anna. You were just a child, and you're allowed to feel whatever you feel about it. It's okay to be angry, to be sad, to feel lost. But you're not alone in this anymore. I'm here for you, and we'll figure it out together. She nodded again, and this time, a small, tentative smile flickered on her lips. It wasn't much, but it was progress. We had made it through this conversation, and though the road ahead would still be difficult, I could see a shift in Anna. She was beginning to understand that she wasn't responsible for her mother's decisions, and she was learning that she could still move forward, no matter how painful the past had been. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything slowly lifting. The room felt lighter somehow, as if we had just cleared a space for something new. And in that moment, I knew we had taken a significant step toward healing. Anna was not alone. Not anymore. I watched Anna as she sat by the window, the evening light casting a warm glow across the room. She had come so far, from a girl lost and alone on the streets to someone who was beginning to believe she could have a future where she didn't have to carry the weight of the past anymore. Her eyes were still filled with uncertainty at times, but now there was a spark in them, a glimmer of hope that hadn't been there before. I knew we had taken significant steps together, but the journey wasn't over. There would still be tough days ahead, days where the pain of the past would resurface, but I had faith that Anna was beginning to heal. She had started to realize that she wasn't defined by her past, that she had the power to write her own story. I sat down beside her, the quiet of the evening surrounding us. How are you feeling? I asked, my voice soft. She looked at me, her eyes thoughtful, and for a moment, I saw that familiar uncertainty. But then, slowly, she smiled. I think I'm starting to feel okay, she said, her voice gentle but steady. It's not all gone, but I don't feel as lost as I did before. I smiled, relieved, and placed a hand on hers. You don't have to have it all figured out, Anna. You're doing great. And it's okay if it takes time. Just take it one step at a time. She nodded, her grip tightening on my hand as if to hold onto the reassurance. I could tell she was trying, and that was all I could ask for. Over the past few weeks, we had built something together, something that hadn't been there before. A sense of family, of safety, of hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. I was thinking, Anna said after a pause, her voice a little more confident than before. Maybe I could visit my old school, just to see if there's any chance of starting over. Maybe I can go back to some of the things I liked doing before. Her words were small, tentative, but they carried a weight that hadn't been there before. She was considering a future beyond just surviving. I felt a rush of pride for her, for the strength she was beginning to find within herself. That sounds like a great idea, I said, my voice warm. You've come so far already, and this could be the first step towards something new. I'll help you with whatever you need. Anna smiled, her eyes lighting up for a moment. Thanks, she said quietly. We sat there for a while, the room peaceful and calm. The past had left its scars on Anna, but those scars didn't define her anymore. She was finding her way forward, and I was going to be there with her every step of the way. As the days passed, Anna continued to take small steps toward healing. She started to open up more, sharing bits and pieces of her past that she had kept locked away for so long. She even started talking about her mother less with sadness and more with understanding, knowing that Sarah had made the best decision she could, even if it hadn't been perfect. The phone call with the authorities had confirmed that Sarah had left the town and wasn't planning to return anytime soon, but Anna had accepted it. She didn't have to wait for someone who might never come back. She had a life here now, with people who cared about her, who would never abandon her. I took her to her old school one afternoon. The school was just as she remembered it, but there was something different in her eyes as we walked through the gates. It wasn't fear anymore. It was curiosity, maybe even a little excitement. She didn't want to go back to her old life, but she wanted to take control of what came next. And I was proud of her for that. As we stood in front of the school, Anna turned to me. I don't know what's going to happen, she said quietly, but I know I can handle it. I'm not afraid anymore. I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. I know you can, I said softly. And whatever happens, we'll face it together. The journey wasn't over. There would still be days when the past tried to pull her back, days when the pain felt too much to bear. But now Anna knew that she didn't have to face it alone. She had a future to build, a future full of possibility. And no matter where life took her, I would be there, always. The sun had set, and the sky was now a deep shade of blue. The stars were beginning to appear, scattered across the sky like tiny points of light. Anna looked up, her eyes following the stars as if she were imagining all the possibilities that lay ahead. Do you think I can do this? She asked quietly, almost to herself. I looked at her, my heart full. I know you can, I said, my voice filled with conviction. You already are. And in that moment, I saw it. The future that Anna had always deserved, the one she was finally beginning to believe in. I didn't know exactly where her path would lead, but I knew that with every step, she was becoming stronger, more confident, and more ready to embrace the life that awaited her. We stood there for a while longer, just looking at the stars, knowing that whatever the future held, we would face it together.